We have to deal with both and approach when you're talking about things like autoimmunity and these, what the world would typically call these mystery illnesses, are not that mysterious when you understand the physiological and the psychological, the physical and the mental, emotional, spiritual. We are overly reductive to say it's just the physical or it's just the mental, emotional, spiritual. It's going to be a confluence of both. But it's not just my experience, it's also in the scientific literature too.
I want to ask you from the get-go, can emotional traumas, emotional disruptions cause autoimmune disease?
So you know my day job for the past 13 years plus has been immersed in cases upon cases upon cases. And these, we see the complex cases, the people that are beyond the basics, the extremely erudite people. They're immersed in the research. They're doing all the quote unquote right wellness things, eating cleaner than most people, doing all the biohacks, and they're still struggling. So I'm used to these sort of complex, very entangled cases, very reactive. Their immune systems are very reactive. So I would say, to answer your question pointedly, that's my experience clinically, is that we have to deal with a both and approach when you're talking about things like autoimmunity and these, what the world would typically call these mystery illnesses, are not that mysterious when you understand what I talk about in the book, the gut and the feeling component of it, the physiological and the psychological, the physical and the mental, emotional, spiritual. And I think we get lost when we are overly reductive to say it's just the physical or it's just the mental, emotional, spiritual. Typically, especially for these type of people that have autoimmunity and these more complex health issues, it's going to be a confluence of both. But it's not just my experience, it's also in the scientific literature too. Research is very clear that children, and a lot of research is done on children that have higher trauma in childhood or are more likely to have autoimmune issues, and not just autoimmune issues, but metabolic issues and other dysregulated nervous system issues later on in life compared to children that don't. Studies upon studies have been done on this. And there's something that we have all patients, telehealth patients, fill out. It's what's called an ACE score, the Adverse Childhood Experience score, which has a lot of research around it, that basically the higher your ACE score, meaning the questions that are asked on the ACE score is things like, was there physical abuse growing up? Was there sexual abuse growing up? Was there alcohol or drug abuse in your household growing up? Was there domestic violence in your house growing up? The higher your ACE, the more likely you're going to have a problem. So it's a piece of the puzzle for many people, and it can create and trigger this genetic predisposition for autoimmunity, which we know, depending on who you're talking about and what study you're referencing, it's about a third of that puzzle is genetics, meaning some methylation gene variant, some HLA gene variant, and we can quantify those on labs too. But 2/3 is epigenetics. And these, what I call in the book, metaphysical meals, these things that we feed ourselves over the course of our life, some unwittingly, it's not completely out of our control. Most of it's out of control. Influences cellular expression and genetic expression over the course of our lives.
And as we have these metaphysical meals throughout our lives, or really on the abundance of when we're young, when we have those traumas, and the ACE scores are off the chart, what is happening in the body? Is it happening in the gut? Is it happening in our nervous system? Do we even know a mechanism or what's predisposing people to this tension that is later in life manifesting?
A lot of the trauma research that I talk about in the book has to do with different methylation gene variants and the way that methylation is expressed. Methylation, as you know, but for people that are newer to this topic, it influences how inflammation is expressed and metabolized. It influences neurotransmitter production and how that's recycled. It influences detoxification pathways. So it's multifactorial. But a lot of it has to do with the gut-brain axis. You really can't talk about methylation without really looking at the role it plays with the brain and the nervous system, and then in part, an aspect of the autonomic nervous system is our gut health. So yes, that's the central part of what's going on, but it's really a cascade of things going on, shifting the nervous system in more of a sympathetic fight or flight, stressed, inflamed state, impacting the parasympathetic. The parasympathetic is weak. There's poor vagal tone for these people. For people that are newer to this, the vagus nerve is the largest and longest cranial nerve in the body, but it's the main integrator, the main governor of the parasympathetic, the resting, the digesting, the hormone balanced state. So someone with poor vagal tone, which is the majority of people that I meet when I first meet them, they're struggling with these inflammatory problems, these gut-brain axis issues, and sort of this, they explain it like the classic wired and tired, anxious and exhausted and inflamed. And that's what's at play here. And the sad part is that most people think that's their lot in life and they don't have any agency over it. But you and I both know it's anything but the case. We wield a lot of influence on our biochemistry if we give it the chance to find its regulation again.
Which sometimes in people's minds is out of their hands. They are doomed to be like this. They see themselves in their dad or their mom and their families. But what you're saying is, no, we can actually make a change.
Yeah.
Particularly, even if we were going through these traumatic experiences during childhood, our nervous system is dysregulated, our vagal tone is flaccid and flimsy, right? That we can strengthen it to bring back our gut, brain, and overall health. Now let's talk about something I do for my health literally every single day. I started taking Athletic Greens because I wanted more energy and I wanted to get in my greens during the day, especially when I'm running around. Now I've been on it for about a year. I love it. Athletic Greens does not taste super healthy, although it is. It's got a mild, tropical, really nice flavor made of vanilla and pineapple. That's the flavors you're gonna get. But what is it? With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help your day start right. It contains less than a gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, no artificial anything, and it tastes good. It supports better sleep quality, recovery, and mental clarity and alertness during the day. It's a small micro habit, and it's got big benefits. The one thing you can do every single day to take great care of yourself, and here at Heal.Thyself, we only partner with brands that I truly believe in. Athletic Greens is one of them. They're a company focused on sustainability. For one, they are a climate neutral certified company. And in 2020, they purchased carbon credits that supports projects protecting old growth rainforests. Additionally, for every purchase, they donate to organizations that help get nutritious foods to children, including No Kid Hungry right here in the United States. And in 2020, Athletic Greens donated over 1.2 million meals to kids. So to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs. You got to make sure your immune system is right when you're traveling. All you have to do is go to athleticgreens.com/heal-thyself. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/heal-thyself to begin taking ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. And it tastes delicious. Hey everyone, I want to talk about Birch Living. This is a partner I've been working with for quite some time now. Sleep is so important to me. I'm always excited to talk about Birch. Why? Because they make some of the best beds in the world, a premium mattress in a box company, and they make mattresses and sleep products that are not only stylish, comfortable, but they're environmentally conscious. They're organic, non-toxic mattresses, and they're made right here in the United States. And for me, it was important to choose a mattress that is made with organic and natural materials because I know I can sleep comfortably, knowing that I'm avoiding all that harmful off-gassing that is coming from those conventional beds that we sleep on. Birch mattresses are Green Guard Gold certified. That is the highest standard that is protecting us from that harmful off-gassing. Now, I have my Birch for about 2 years. I love that it's breathable, keeps me cool at night, is supportive with my pressure points. I feel like I'm on a cloud, allergen and mildew resistant, and made of raw materials sourced straight from nature. Now check this out. With your Birch mattress, you get a 100-night sleep trial along with a 25-year warranty. And the best part about all this is that Birch delivers your mattress right to your door free within the United States. And it comes rolled up in a box, super easy to set up for yourself. I love my Birch mattress, and I think you will too. If you're looking for a new bed, check out Birch. You can click the link below or go to birchliving.com/heal-thyself and get 20% off of your mattress, plus 2 free pillows. If you're looking for a mattress for your little ones, also check out the Birch Kids line, the best of the best. What are some of the ways that we can strengthen this vagus nerve, the vagal tone?
Well, and that's the both and approach that I think where we in functional medicine really excel at, or we should be excelling at, because we have the training and the resources to really apply what's in the scientific literature in an unrestrained way that's effective, an effective way, without red tape and without limitations. So as I talk about in the book, what I've seen to be the most effective is a both-and approach of dealing with both the physiological and the psychological. So there's 42 plus different tools that I talk in the book. Half have to do with gut physiological side, dealing with the things that we can measure on labs that I measure as far as like underlying gut problems, like leaky gut syndrome, people that have SIBO. I have a lot of people that have mast cell activation syndrome and histamine intolerance and have other oxalate issues and salicylate issues, and a lot of these hyperreactions that the brain is rich with these receptor sites that impair neurotransmitter signaling. So all of that has to be dealt with. That's a big conversation, but it involves different food changes. It involves different nutritional therapeutic interventions as far as herbal, botanical, plant medicine ways to modulate the immune system, i.e. lowering inflammation, and the nervous system, i.e. supporting the parasympathetic on a physical level. So it's sort of what I would call advanced functional medicine nutritional protocols. One of the things I talk about on that front is a GAPS protocol, which is an acronym that stands for gut and physiology or gut and psychology syndrome that we've used for the past 13 years plus. That's a great way to be supportive and nourishing and grounding to getting the gut, that seat of the soul, to be more restorative and, again, accentuating that parasympathetic. The feeling side, which is a lot of what's in the book, are different tools that are tapping into that mental emotional derangement, that mental emotional entanglement, the dysregulation. So I go into deep dive as far as meditation and different meditation practices that have a lot of exciting science about it. It's not just some woo-woo fringe thing. This is things that's within the journals, and talking about meditation and breath work and detail and the protocols that I've seen to be the most effective for my telehealth patients, and more out-of-the-box stuff, somatic experiences. I mean, these are things that you're on the ground doing with people within your workshops. I'm just showing people in the book what people in our space are doing to really change lives. So I talk about body tapping and emotional release and drumming and yoga and Tai Chi and the science around that. All different movement medicines, if you will, or moving meditations. And Shinrin Yoku, and did forest bathing and showing people how to use nature as a meditation and medicine. So there's specific functional medicine protocols within here that I just threw a lot of stuff out there. I'm not saying that everybody has to do all the things, but what I wanted to show them is if you experiment with these things, see what resonates with you. Not all of it's going to be applicable to everybody, but you will find that there's going to be a handful of things that's going to be applicable for you. And what I want the reader to do is stay consistent with these gut and feeling, respectively, tools, because that's when you'll start to see healing and move past the plateau.
And I love that you said seat of the soul, right?
Yeah.
You have to focus on your gut health. But we've been talking about this for 5 years, 6 years, even longer, right?
Yeah.
I love this move towards also physical, metaphysical, right? We need to talk about the things that are so essential at creating the foundation to gut healing, because you can't just heal your gut if you're not doing the other stuff.
Yeah, and I see some people where the physiological stuff, and I'm sure you've seen this too, where the physical stuff is, like people ask me, well, is it more the gut or the feeling stuff? Like which one's more important? I think it depends on who you're talking to. And that's sort of the science and art of what we do, right? For some people, if they have a lot of digestive issues and their resilience is so low, they can't even tap into the mental, emotional, spiritual stuff. They're so inflamed, the gut-brain axis, they're so brain foggy and fatigued, they're so hyperreactive that it's going to serve them well to start getting down some of that proverbial water, get their head above that proverbial water, to be able to breathe a little bit and gain some bandwidth, gain some resilience to handle the deep emotional release work, to handle the somatic work that has to happen. But then other people, the food stuff is completely triggering to them, and they just can't even cross. They could never dream of not having foods
Yeah.
that don't love them back. It's just a
Yeah.
very toxic relationship. But just like someone's in a toxic relationship, they couldn't dream of leaving that, right? It's just all they know. And it's very comfortable for them, and it's very codependent upon them. And that's people's relationship with the foods that don't love them back. And for them, the emotional release, the breath work, the meditation will calm our nervous system enough to be able to handle the nutrition stuff. So those are extreme examples. Most people can have a bit of both in both areas and stay consistent with it. The point being, these are two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, 100%, right? It's
Yeah.
not mind and body.
Yeah.
It's one, and
one.
they're interconnected. They're entangled. There's no other way around it, right? And I've seen that. It's a lot of people release these repressed emotions they've been holding in since they were children. And then they crave different foods. And then they have a new relationship, and then they lose weight, and they eat, right, the same amount of calories, but what they're holding on, the inflammation just goes away, and it's really powerful.
Yeah.
But then there's the people who are so inflamed, who are they can't even focus. They're in pain. We got to bring that inflammation down. Why is the gut so important in the sense of how we feel? What role is the gut playing in influencing our feelings day to day?
Well, in so many ways. I mean, just a little primer, and then I'll get into the more, next level deep stuff. But for people that are newer to this conversation, the gut and brain are formed from the same fetal tissue. That babies are growing in their mother's womb, and this sort of gut garden, this gut-brain axis is formed from that same fetal tissue. And if you think about it, the intestines kind of even resemble the brain. 95% of serotonin is made in the gut. That's our happy neurotransmitter. 50% of dopamine, that pleasure chemical, 50% of that's made in the gut and stored in the gut. So it's no coincidence that researchers refer to the gut as the second brain. And 75% of the immune system is in the gut. So inflammation's a product of the immune system. So there's three things going on right there. It's actually the microbiome itself, like all the trillions of bacteria of the gut, upwards of 100 trillion bacteria, depending on the study that you look at. But that's about 10 times, meaning that we are 10 times more bacteria than human. We have about 10 trillion human cells. So we have co-evolved with this microbiome. And that's probably an unfair thing to say even to the microbiome. In many ways, we almost exist because of the microbiome. Like, it created us in some ways. Because the microbiome leaves, we would be dead. We would not be able to convert thyroid hormones, 20% of it. We would not be able to make our neurotransmitters. Our immune system would not function without it. So we really do need it. And I've heard different researchers kind of explain sort of the narrative of it is that the microbiome almost needed us to transport it and move it around the world. Like, all the bacteria needed these sort of these vehicles to populate. And now we've really turned against the microbiome. We're living in what researchers call an evolutionary mismatch. There's a genetic epigenetic chasm, meaning our world has changed so much in such a dramatically short period of time, a finite period of time, and you're putting that in context with the totality of human history. 99% of our genetics haven't changed in 10,000 years. So this genetic epigenetic mismatch is really at the heart of it. So how does the gut influence the brain? It really is impacting because the bacteria is actually making and producing these metabolites that influence and crosstalk, if you will, with the way that neurotransmitters like serotonin and acetylcholine and dopamine and GABA are influenced. But also, as I mentioned, 75% of the immune system is there. There's a whole field of research called the cytokine model of cognitive function. Cytokines are pro-inflammatory cells, so it's research looking at how's it impacting how our brain works. And there's a lot of gut-centric components to that inflammation because most of the immune system resides there. And then on top of that, the autonomic nervous system, and that one branch of the autonomic nervous system, the enteric nervous system, but also the vagus nerve, which is intimately tied to resting and digesting. So it's multifactorial, but it's a multi-pronged influence that the gut wields on how our mood is. Like, how do we feel? Are we irritable? Are we energetic? Are we anxious? Are we depressed? Well, there's multiple ways that researchers are looking at how the gut and the gastrointestinal system is impacting how we feel.
I can attest to it anytime. My gut is off, my brain is off.
Yeah.
It's the most clear thing. I don't even need a research study to show me this anymore.
Yeah, nor do I.
But so powerful to think about the nervous system, the immune system, neurotransmitters in the gut, the microbiome.
Yeah.
It's, again, multifactorial, like you said.
Yeah.
You can't just do one thing or look at one thing. When we talk about this vagus nerve, and you said polyvagal theory, right? Some people have heard of it. Some people haven't heard about it.
Yeah.
Well, what is polyvagal theory, and what's the implication in our health?
So it was researched, I think, at the latter half of the 20th century or so, somewhere. I don't know the exact date. It's in the book. But it's a good theoretical way to explain how trauma and things like chronic stress and other, let's just say, junk foods for the human body, metaphysical junk foods, how is it impacting and literally stored in our cells? How is it wiring our nervous system? How is it raising inflammation? So there's 3 different levels, 3 different stages within this theory. And it's showing how the human nervous system can exist on a continuum, on a spectrum, from dorsal vagal, which is sort of I'm resting, I'm in this sort of balanced, regulated state. I'm in a state of ease and lightness and grace, all the way to sympathetic activation, which is a lot of people. I mean, most of the world is in varying degrees of that, right? They're on that sort of go, hustle culture. Burnout is a badge of honor. It's like rest is seen as a sign of weakness. Being introverted, and I talk a lot about JOMO in the book, like how I live my life, which is easy for many introverts, but the joy of missing out, so the antithesis of this FOMO culture, of hyperconnection. And then the other side of it is the ventral vagal. It's basically the immune system and the nervous system's completely shut down. And people can be in here in times in their life when they're really overwhelmed, they're burnt out, they are... but they're not always living in that state. And then some people are always there. Some people have what's known in mainstream medicine as dysautonomia. It's the autonomic nervous system is completely, perpetually stuck in an overactivation of the sympathetic hypertone, or overactivation of that fight or flight response. So polyvagal theory really explains how that sort of spectrum of the autonomic nervous system exists and how things like trauma can actually impact that. And it's fascinating, and I talk about it in the book, how ancient yogic philosophy, yogic science, thousands of years old and from India, have similar phases that they explained thousands of years ago of how the human nervous system exists. And that goes back to, like you said, I don't even need a study to do this. Because like humans knew intuitively that science is just catching up with antiquity. And it's such the height of hubris, right, that we need some sort of academic or placebo-controlled, randomized control trial, when these sort of ancient traditional sciences and arts were explaining the same thing. I mean, it was Hippocrates and all of these fathers and modern medicine that were saying all the things I'm saying too.
And now we're just like, wait a minute, let's do a randomized control trial on that. And now we see.
And how did Paracelsus, how did Hippocrates, how did these yogic science artists, people, gurus know all this stuff? I don't know how they knew, but they knew. And part of me just thinks they were more in tune with nature. They were more in tune with the human body. And they were observing people.
That's actually true.
Yeah.
So when I teach language of the body, I teach people how to connect to their body and start listening to what it's telling you. Because inevitably, the more you connect with your body over time, you will begin to hear it. It will show you through symbolism, sort of like dreams. You know, in a dream state, when you see, if I say picture a car, you may see a car that you saw on the way here. But if I say picture a car from your body, it might be on Jupiter with a leprechaun on top of it, right?
Yeah.
And there's always meaning to what your body's telling you. So the more connected you are with your body, the more you connect to your intuition. And that's what intuition is. And the crazy thing is, the more you honor that intuition, the more your body is louder with speaking to you. And it's an intuition honor cycle. And I just believe that they were just unlocking the wisdoms of what is already known in the body. We don't need science for that. So it's a beautiful thing. Now we've sort of celebrated so much, and rightfully so, but also, like you said, a lot of hubris to bring it to our logic, to our ego, thinking that we know best with our logic, ego, and science is great,
Yeah.
but also, whoa, not at the expense of this.
Right.
We're talking about this is the healer.
Right.
The body's the healer.
Yeah, you're right. It's sort of a deification of something that we end up in the same place we began.
Exactly, over it. But we celebrate 1,000 years later. We're like, yes, breakthroughs. We're like,
the latest cutting edge science.
Yeah.
Right.
We got it, and that's what happens. So, what's happening also then in the brain? What's happening through the vagus nerve if your gut is imbalanced, your neurotransmitters, your immune system, your nervous system inflamed? How is the brain now suffering?
So the food, there's a lot of things happening, but when we eat food, and hopefully everybody's eating that's listening to this right now, but when we eat food, we ferment fibers mainly and polyphenols, really those two are the main ones, and fatty acids will too. And the gut bacteria will ferment a lot of these things and produce what are called short-chain fatty acids. One of these short-chain fatty acids is called butyrate. There's propionate and acetate and different ones. But butyrate's one of the most well-researched and the one most well-linked to being really beneficial to the human immune system, i.e. modulating inflammation in a positive way and playing a role in how our brain works. Coincidentally, a lot of the research around the ketogenic diet, when you hear of the main ketone, beta-hydroxybutyrate or BHB, it's biochemically related to butyrate, which is endogenously created through fermentation of plant fibers as a short-chain fatty acid in the gut. So it's similar mechanisms. They both have neuroprotective, beneficial for your brain and your mood benefits. One's taken through a fasted state. So fasted state produces beta-hydroxybutyrate. The ketogenic diet will produce it because it's fasting mimicking, but your gut's making it through you eating foods. So that's one of the ways is that it's the metabolites that are produced, these postbiotics that are produced from gut bacteria that are then cross-talking or signaling molecules to the way that our brain expressed. One of the ways is encouraging things like neurogenesis, encouraging things like autophagy in the brain or cellular renewal, encouraging things like proper signaling of neurotransmitters. It's basically allowing the brain and the brain's immune system, because the old science was that the brain was immune privileged, that it didn't have its own immune system, but we know with the microglial cells and with this neuroinflammatory cascade that's implicated in things like anxiety and depression, that's what's really happening. It's the gut really pruning and nourishing and protecting the brain.
And what amazing moment to think about that the gut and the brain are so interrelated, and to think our bacteria are protecting our brain. Like, look at that intelligent design. It's so incredible how that happens. And it's when I think about how disrupted our bacteria is, how much our brain is being affected already. It's incredible. Like you said, it's like an atomic bomb to our gut bacteria, the trillions of bacteria. Like we're diverging from the way we evolved, and our bacteria is like, hey, you're not my vehicle anymore. I needed you to cross continent. Up until now, there haven't been many supplements on the market that support mitophagy. Now, this is the flushing out of old mitochondria. And in the past, I thought I discovered this compound called urolithin A. I soon found that it was all the longevity forums and people were talking about it, but I was super intrigued. And it's derived from pomegranate, but it's very hard, nearly impossible to eat or drink enough pomegranate to get the scientifically proven dose. Now, this is where MitoPure from Timeline Nutrition comes in. They've created 3 easy and delicious ways to get your daily dose of 500 milligrams of urolithin A in their product called MitoPure. The way that I take it is in this frosted bottle with soft gels, and they're used for travel, but you can use them anywhere, really. And I love it, particularly because it's different than coffee. Coffee, you will feel. Even a lot of matcha, you will feel. This is a sustained, energetic, you're smooth, you're flowing through the day, and it's supporting energy production, longevity, and they did a randomized controlled trial showing that it is helpful for muscle strength and endurance. So if you're working out, That's another plus. MitoPure is the first product of a precise dose of urolithin A to upgrade your mitochondrial function. The benefits of this increase cellular energy and improve muscle strength and endurance. Timeline is offering 10% off of your first order of MitoPure. Go to timelinenutrition.com/DRG and use the code DRG to get 10% off of your order. Again, that's Timeline Nutrition, TIMELINE, NUTRITION.com/DRG. I recommend trying their starter pack with all 3 formats. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink that has everything you need. That means all the salt and none of the sugar. It's got a science-backed electrolyte ratio of 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium. It has no sugar, no artificial coloring, no artificial ingredients, gluten, or fillers. Now, Element is formulated to help you get your electrolyte needs that are perfectly suited for your lifestyle, whatever it is, especially if you're running around athletic and sweating. Extra important. Now, when it comes to Element, you need your electrolytes through the day. Whether or not you're working out, you need a basic level of electrolytes to really be functioning at a higher level, to feel good in your body, to reduce the symptoms of electrolyte deficiency like headaches, muscle cramps, fatigue, sleeplessness, and other common symptoms. So I have felt much better using Element, especially after my sauna. I would be wiped out when I get into the sauna. And I utilize Element every time I'm in there and before, and I'm always good, never depleted. Very important if you're purifying your water to get good quality minerals. It's one of the top recommendations. Now, Element is offering you, the Heal Thyself listener, a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single-serving packs free with any Element order. It's a great way to try all 8 of their flavors, right? And you share it with a friend, see which one is your favorite. Now, go to drinkelement.com/DRG. The deal is only available through my link. You must go to drinkLMNT.com/DRG. Element offers no questions asked refunds and is totally risk-free. If you don't like it, you get your money back, no questions asked. You have nothing to lose, and get hydrated. But what about then the brain? Is our brain talking to our gut?
Yeah, it's bidirectional. So the vagus nerve is one of the main ways that it does, and the enteric nervous system is one of the main ways it does. And there's many ways to think about it, but one that comes to mind is, and that's why it's bidirectional, just to repeat myself, it's bidirectional. It's not just the gut talking to the brain, it is also the brain talking to the gut. It's crosstalk. So the brain speaks to the gut through, one of the ways is what's called the migrating motor complex. It's this MMC is the acronym. It's the gut that staying properly innervated, the intestines staying properly innervated, keeping the bacteria of the microbiome largely in the large intestines. That's sort of the reservoir for the microbiome. This gut garden, this microbiome metropolis has to stay there. But a lack, so for example, and research has shown this, and I talk about it in the book, is that if someone has a traumatic brain injury, sporting injury, they have a car accident, they have poor cervical alignment that's impacting their cranial nerves, that can slow down that neural output, that communication between the brain and the digestive system, which is really a problem going on in our world today. And that's the other side of that coin of what's breeding things like SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and in my opinion, what I see clinically with patients, decreasing the resilience and allowing a lot of other opportunistic and pathogenic bacteria, or let me say it this way, opportunistic and pathogenic biotoxins from bacteria and viruses and mold toxins to creep up. And the body cannot regulate itself appropriately. It's really creating a hospitable environment for these things that otherwise the immune system could handle. And now the resilience is so lacking in so many people that these things are taking hold, and like weeds overgrowing in this gut garden, it's modulating the immune system in a very negative way. And then for many people, it has to do with their brain health.
Yeah.
But it's this big vicious cycle, because the more that happens, the more the metabolites are going to go and negatively impact the brain. So what came first, the chicken or the egg? It depends on who you're talking about and their health history. And that's why on a clinical level, health history really matters to untangle that appropriately. But in the book, I teach people some ways for them to have agency on their own health, to learn about their body and see what pieces of the puzzle are the most relevant for them.
So from the dietary standpoint, right? Let's say there's a brain injury, the gut's a mess, and this person who comes into your clinic goes, Doc, I don't know what I have to eat. Nobody ever taught me to eat. You mentioned polyphenols and fiber. What foods are we looking at? What are some of the most important things that we need to be bringing in to start healing our brain?
Yeah. So that is sort of how reactive is their system. This is really where we have to go with. Some people, I mean, we see very reactive systems, and then we see people that are just the average American, right? And not everybody is at the same starting point. So I want to just say you have to meet a person where they're at physiologically, but also on a mental, emotional, spiritual level too. Because even if you know, hey, health history-wise, you're looking at this person's case, you're like, yeah, I know they're here, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, we need to start them more beginner stuff. So you can't really force, what's the saying, like a square peg through a round hole. You can't. And then later on, they'll get malleable and resilient when they start feeling a little better because you're pragmatic, and then they'll be a round peg because they become more resilient. But anyway, some things that I would say for most people that have gut-brain axis, microbiome mood issues, if you will, is soups and stews. You could do plant-based soups and stews, you could do omnivore soups and stews, but something that's almost like pre-digesting the vegetables, for example, or pre-digesting the meats. Or if you're doing beans, plant-based proteins, something that's soft. I mean, I have some people that have to puree things to be as gentle on the gut as possible. It's sort of this sort of proverbial siesta for their gut. And we're talking, for some people, yeah, weeks. You can make big, amazing changes with some of the soup recipes I talk about in the book in a couple of days for some people. But you and I both know this isn't going to be fully calmed down in a few days for most of these people. So depending on where they're at on that inflammation spectrum is dependent on how therapeutically, how long they're gonna have to go at this. These are not quick fix issues for many people out in the world that are struggling with these mystery illness issues. But weeks and months, and for some people years, really working on these therapeutic food protocols while simultaneously working on these mental, emotional, spiritual tools. But soups and stews are a wonderful way. But as I talk about in the book, there's caveats. I mean, bone broth, for example, can be a wonderful tool for some people, but depending on how you cook it, can be higher histamines, which a lot of these people tend to be a little bit, it can increase anxiety, increase brain fog, increase migraines and things like this. So that's sort of I'm setting the record straight in the book to show people even healthy things, what works for one person may not work for the next person, and what serves you today isn't always going to have to be the case. Like the goal is to gain more resilience. You can eat tons of things and be fine, but that's sort of the strategy, one of the strategies from a nutrition standpoint that I talk about.
Yeah, and to think about like soups and stews being so nourishing, I've always been drawn to them, especially in the winter. It's like, I'm always happy because I always feel like my gut is there's a nourishing aspect that you even just feel when you put it in your body. It doesn't matter if it's omnivore or plant-based or both. It just helps so much. And
they're both in their book. But I would say the soup, again, think of our ancestors.
Right.
They would have done this. When people were sick, they were giving people, there's a reason why. It's like chicken soup. When you're sick, it's not the noodles that are making people better.
That's true.
I hate
that's
to break
true.
it to you. But.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So when you were connecting this metaphysical part of everything, right, and the feelings part, was there anything when you were researching that you were like, holy moly, this is really powerful stuff?
Yeah. So it's heavy, like the trauma section, the shame section. There's a concept that I talk in the book, but it's a phrase that I've talked about with my patients for years, is shameflammation. It's sort of this concept of like, what's people's relationship with food, relationship with their body. I talk a lot about diet culture and anti-diet culture, and really, in a way, I think I have issues with both, and they both are extreme, and this sort of toxic tribalism, I think, within wellness really confuses a lot of well-meaning people. So part of, that's not answering your question, because that really wasn't shocking to me. I just wanted to like get on my soapbox and really set the record straight. But within that same section, to your question with this, it's the section around transgenerational trauma or intergenerational trauma. It sounds science fiction, just like the microbiome controlling your cravings and your mood can sound science fiction for some people. now amongst our community, that seems less like to the people that listen to the words we talk about. I mean, that the fact that the microbiome influences food cravings and like what you crave and what you think seems less science fiction to the health aficionado. But the intergenerational and transgenerational trauma is really the next frontier, I think, of us understanding. And look, many of us have enough trauma in this lifetime to worry about, but we have to realize that part of the collective trauma that we have in this lifetime has to do, for many of us, there's a component to it at the very least, an intergenerational one. Yeah. And the research is looking at this too, that the historical events that were looked at in a few different journals, one had to do with the Ukrainian famine in the early 20th century. It was a man-made famine, actually, and some would argue a genocide of the Ukrainian people in the early 20th century. Joseph Stalin, and then I think of history repeating itself. Like every time the Ukrainian people wanted to have independence, Russia's there to sort of squash them. And what they did in the early 20th century was completely messed up and killed millions of people. But researchers looked at the descendants of these people who went through this man-made famine and saw methylation epigenetic heirlooms, in a way, is how they explain it. And it being expressed cellularly in their great-grandkids. And that shows up as anxiety disorders, as autoimmune issues, as type 2 diabetes, and other metabolic issues, weight loss resistance, and hypervigilant nervous system. And then similarly, descendants of the Holocaust in Germany and in Poland, similar things, is that kids, grandkids, great-grandkids had these specific methylation variants because of what their great-grandparents went through. So, but look, we can't change what they went through, but just as trauma can be inherited, so can healing. And I see people all the time break the chains of trauma and break the chains of dis-ease and dysfunction that was in their family history and heal not only themselves, but heal their children, their family, their children's children, and descendants they'll never get to see.
Yeah.
They will create a new legacy. So this is really, in my opinion, while it's sobering and heavy stuff that I talk about in the book, it ultimately is a message of redemption and like what can we do today to actually influence cellular and genetic expression through our choices.
Break That's those powerful. Generational, very powerful. And you can break those generational wounds, the trauma, right? I remember doing a little bit on a show, and I was even reading about nematode traumas going down 19 generations. They're still expressing those genetic mutations. And I was like, wow, right? And then the humans, they talked a little about Rwanda, Holocaust, and you're not doomed to it.
Yeah.
And that's the big part of it, right? You may be more sensitive to cortisol, your nervous system may be a little bit more hypervigilant, maybe more, but now it's also our responsibility to know that, to feel that, and go through these processes of all the practices that you're putting in this book that are accessible. We can do them. They don't take 2 hours of our day.
No, most of it, it's not at all. Just consistency, even like 5-15 minutes. Some people is more intensive, but at the very least, 5 to 15 minutes. And most of them are free, too.
Right.
I'm not talking about high-end, bougie stuff. They can get access to this completely low cost or free.
And it can make a big, big change. When you looked at the meditation, did it change the brain? And when you looked at studies, does it change the brain?
Absolutely. It impacts the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. Because most people, when they're that reptilian part of the brain is in overactivation. That sort of like fear, anxiety, dread, that sympathetic tone is overactivation. Prefrontal cortex thickening, like the health, the juiciness of the prefrontal cortex is improved whenever people consistently meditate.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah. I mean, that's neuroplasticity, right? I mean, that's what we have the ability to make new neurons and allow our brain to mold and regenerate.
I think about the show that I did on meditation. I was thinking how the brains of people who meditate consistently are just younger. They're just healthier and younger. And like you said, juicy cortex. It's like alive. They're out of the reptilian brain. And you know, when was it? There was a study on children. Right? Children were just doing better in school, not getting suspended, not getting expelled, less fights, less acting up, just by being present. It's actually, like pound for pound, one of the most powerful things you can do.
It should be required, in my opinion, any school, like teaching meditation. I mean, the research is so clear.
Yeah.
The teachers are gonna have a better job, a better time. It's gonna be, the kids are gonna be more equipped for life and be more resilient and have tools. People just need to listen to you and me, man. We'll run the world.
I feel you. So when we're meditating, what's happening with the gut? Is inflammation going to be going down? Is there a connection between the
yes. So I'll tell you one study that I talk about in the book. It has to do with self-compassion specifically, which meditation, this is specific self-compassion exercise that they did in the study, and I give different self-compassion practices. But loving kindness meditation, that's one kind. Self-compassion practices, which I hear it referred to in the research as self-compassion, but I consider that a meditative practice. Anything that's anchoring you in your body, getting you out of your head, so to speak, and into your body, or rooting you in the present moment is a meditative practice. But this one study showed they had a group that they made do math problem solving, and one was public speaking, and this interleukin-6 protein spiked up. The inflammatory IL-6 spiked up because they're doing things that most humans don't like, which is doing math and public speaking. But the people that had the highest self-compassion scores, that were doing these self-compassion practices as part of their life, had lower inflammation levels. And then the second day that this group did that, you thought, okay, people got used to it. They were doing the math, they were doing the public speaking, maybe it's kind of calmed down. No, the inflammation was even higher the second day. And you think, this is people's lives, right? They're doing things they don't like, they're not good at, they're not resilient at. Inflammation is spiking. And then on top of that, poor sleep will spike high sensitivity C-reactive protein. People aren't sleeping very well, which is contributing to that stressed out mode. So yes, meditation, that's just one study, but being self-compassion, meditation, breath work will all modulate the immune system in a positive way, because in part, it is shifting the body into more of a parasympathetic regulated state. Cortisol is an endogenous immunosuppressant, right? It's a natural anti-inflammatory. So cortisol spiked to help with, yes, blood pressure and blood sugar, and to get you out of that threatened situation from an evolutionary standpoint, but it's also attenuating inflammation. It's also calming inflammation. So that's why in a lot of these inflamed individuals, i.e. most of us, you will see cortisol dysfunction, HPA axis circadian rhythm dysfunction, in part because it's trying to calm your inflammation levels down.
Yeah. And isn't it funny how the body's always responding?
Yeah.
It's like, no, I got you, and no, the doctor's like, no, this is a bad thing, right?
Right.
Let's learn how to listen to the body. What is it telling us, right? Because if we don't learn how to listen to the body, then we're just going to put Band-Aids on it over and over and
That's
over.
What I'm always telling my patient, because they'll see the cortisol all over the place, and they'll say, well, I just want to get it down. Well, I'm like, first of all, cortisol is protecting you right now.
Yeah.
Like because I see the patients, like the chronic fatigue syndrome patients, cortisol is typically very low. Inflammation's through the roof. Talk to anybody with chronic fatigue syndrome, it's no walk in the park. But the people that are sort of earlier on in that spectrum of that inflammatory response, cortisol is up when it should be down, or down when it should be up, or it's up a lot of the day. They want it to be low. It's not about that. It's about asking why. These hormones are biochemical emails. Why are the emails being sent? They're not happening in a vacuum. We have to look at the feeling and the gut stuff to see why inflammation levels up in the first place.
Powerful. I wanted to sort of tail end on this. You mentioned breath work. You got some stuff about breath work. is so trendy all of a sudden, right? As all the breathwork businesses, everybody's a breathwork teacher out of nowhere.
Well, I'm sure here, not in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Oh, not in Pittsburgh. Oh,
no, please.
Stay. You're out here for a week and a half. Just keep your eyes open, and you'll see. But is this the real deal? Is there science behind breathwork? Is there good stuff around? I know that this was ancient, right?
Yeah,
Maybe science is not catching up.
Yeah.
But what are you seeing with the breathwork as far as physiologically what it's doing?
Yeah, it's another way to tap into the present moment. So it's a meditative practice, but the actual physical act of breath work is oxygenating your body and allowing your parasympathetic to be strengthened. So I think of breath work as sort of another exercise for your nervous system. It's a way to sort of strengthen that parasympathetic, that polyvagal tone. And that's why things like there are different, therapies and concepts of attempts to strengthen the vagal tone by even gurgling water, or even people doing strange things, right? to strengthen their vagus nerve. Well, you don't have to gargle water. You can if you want to. Breath work will do that as well. So you hear the rage along with the breath work. This is tied into the breath work, I guess, is all the cold plunges in the world, which I love a cold plunge too. But part of that has to do with the vagus nerve as well, and the breath and the cold, these sort of hermetic things. And especially when you look at the more advanced breath work, like the holotropic breath work, that's a hormetic stress on the body. It's sort of was created in part because it's sort of simulating psychedelics, which is similarly shifting the nervous system in a way where, so it's all tied into the autonomic nervous system being regulated. Yeah. People are just finding new ways or remembering old ways to regulate their nervous system.
Because let me tell you something, you and me as cavemen, we're gonna go hunting and it's gonna be cold as hell outside, right? And I'm not gonna have a North Face parka on and fleece pants. It's gonna be cold. That's our cold exposure, right? Yeah. It's like we go through this naturally, but now we have $4,000 tubs that we just buy instead, right?
Well, I live on the East Coast, so I just walk outside.
Oh, dude, it's the one thing I miss. Is I can be outside, put my feet on the ground. It is cold. I went there for Christmas in New Jersey. Yeah. This was when we had that cold front. Okay. It was brick cold. Yeah. I don't miss it every day though. Yeah. God bless you.
You heard it here, folks. He's moving back to the East Coast.
I'm staying right here with the sun and my feet on the ground. Hey man, is there anything else that we didn't cover that was really important for you to put out there?
I mean, not to go back to things that are probably gonna piss people off in the book, but I think that the diet culture, anti-diet culture stuff, I really wanted to have a heart-to-heart, raw conversation about that, because I think that toxic diet culture, shaming people into wellness, it's so old, it's so archaic, it's so just done, right? No one's gonna say that's good, right, within the health and wellness space, or they shouldn't, right? But I feel like this other sort of behemoth, sort of complete toxic tribalism on the other side of anti-diet culture is just as toxic in many ways. They sort of remove all sense of logic, and it's confusing my people, and by my people, I mean people with autoimmunity and people trying to just learn about health and wellness, because they're like, well, I'm being told by the anti-diet culture people that there's no such thing as a bad food. And that's a reductive overgeneralization. I get where they're coming from to a certain degree, because they are hurting people too, and they've been burned by diet culture. But the fact is, there's going to be foods that raise inflammation. There's going to be foods that impact your blood sugar. There's going to be foods that are out of alignment from an ancestral evolutionary standpoint that humans just wouldn't have eaten. Our microbiome doesn't like it. Believe me, I look at labs all day long. It doesn't like it. And I just wanted to teach people a third way that I talk to my patients about in the book, and I call it food peace. That avoiding things that don't love you back isn't restrictive, it's self-respect. And continuing to eat things that don't love you back, that's disordered, in my opinion. That's like staying in a toxic relationship and wondering why you're still miserable. So this sort of upside down culture where up is down and down is up, I just wanted to give a true, authentic conversation from a functional medicine perspective about like getting in touch with your gut feelings and be your own N of 1 experiment. Explore things. Like some people are gonna land on more of a plant-based diet. Some people are gonna land on more of an omnivore. Some people are gonna be a flexitarian and have different things. Like that's the bucket analogy, right? Some people have big buckets, some people have small buckets. That's bio-individuality. We're all different, that's okay. And I want people to explore that for themselves, but ultimately be okay with the fact that there are some things that don't love you back. And that ultimately is okay to know. So we didn't talk about that, so I guess I'll end there with
I love that, and it's inspiring to hear that. I mean, you're right. It's the pushing to the health world that you have to do it this way is old news. But I've seen that bounce on the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And I see it. I see it on pages and I see it on blogs, and I'm like, whoa, okay, maybe we shouldn't eat this every day, you know? But I get that energy behind it.
Yeah.
But it's still confusing a lot of people. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. When is this book coming out, man?
March 21st. So depending on when they listen to this, it could be out. But it's for pre-order right now. We're giving away tons of free stuff when people pre-order the book.
I love it. And how do people, if this is the first time hearing, they don't know that you're on the trifecta over here, how do people find you?
Go back to listen to my past episodes on this amazing podcast that you're having, because this is like a trilogy. They just heard part 3.
Yeah, you can't just go to part 3.
No.
You need to see what's
You
happening.
have to see it, now you have to go back and listen to it in order for it to make sense. You'll see a friendship blossoming.
Exactly.
So everything's at drwillcole.com, drwillcole.com. The podcast, which you were on, thank you for coming on. It's called The Art of Being Well. It's out every week, so come back on anytime.
And your Instagram, come on, man.
Instagram at Dr. Will Cole. I'm trying TikTok, but I don't know what the heck I'm doing.
Hey, listen, we're about the same age. Yes. We need a TikTok like early Gen Z. I need like a 19-year-old TikToker.
Or like a toddler could teach us, because more than we can learn.
Please, man, you got to see I got my glasses on the tip of my nose trying to just go through this TikTok. I'm like, how do we do this? So, bro, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming here, man. All the love. I respect your work so much. You put so much heart into it. You put so much heart into seeing your patients all the time. Your books are so informative, man, and you're in your purpose. I see that, and all the love to you, man.
Love you, man. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the show. Thank you for rating, reviewing, and subscribing. If you haven't, support the show by doing so. Share it with a loved one, and check out our hot, new, fire, sustainable, organic merch at hts.today.